Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining myself, Sophie Parrott, a journalist at HR Grapevine, today for an HR Grapevine and Bridge webinar titled Developing Your Strategy to Improve Mental Wellbeing at Work. Particularly in the pandemic year, supporting staff mental health and wellbeing, as we all know, has been a top priority for employers, as many understand the impact that this can have on staff, business, and the HR agenda. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Jane Grant, who is a strategic customer success manager for EMEA at Bridge, and also by Lindsay Cooper, who is reward and benefits manager at Pinsent Masons LLP, who will be discussing today the importance for targeted mental health strategies and also how to start developing them. But before I hand over directly to them to discuss this topic further, I just wanted to run you through a bit of housekeeping before we get started. So throughout the duration of the webinar, we will be launching a couple of polls, so please do get involved when those pop up on your screen. There is also a question function where you'll be able to put forward some questions to our speakers, and we'll try and get through as many of those as possible towards the end of the webinar in our Q&A session. But without any further ado, I'd like to hand over directly to Sarah Jane and Lindsay to discuss the topic further.
Thank you, Sophie, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Sarah Jane. I'm a Strategic Customer Success Manager here at Bridge for the EMEA region. I've got 20 plus years of experience in working with HR, talent, learning and performance solutions, plus 5 years plus working in the software HR solutions environment. I'm an executive and accredited coach, and really looking forward to our session this morning.
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Cooper. I am the Reward and Benefits Manager at Pinsent Masons LLP. I've been at Pinsent Masons for 8 years, working in a variety of different HR roles. And my role at Pinsent Masons is managing all of the global firm's benefits, and also sitting on the Health and Wellbeing Steering Group for the firm, which encompasses many different departments across Pinsent Masons, looking at our health and wellbeing strategy.
Thanks, Lindsay. So, as Sophie alluded to at the top of the session, mental health is a really big and key topic right now, particularly as we very slowly come out of our current pandemic. But mental health is not a destination, it's a process. And what Lindsay and I are going to look at with you today is how we help our employees navigate the obstacles on that road of mental health and support them with different initiatives and what we can do in that space to support not only them as individuals, but the organisation as a holistic whole. So let's talk about mental health. Approaching mental health within the workforce is likely one of the biggest challenges currently facing HR at the moment. Whilst the lived experience of workers may well be deeply personal, a considered approach from the function has the potential to not only improve overall workforce wellbeing and productivity, but also the lives of workers who may well be struggling. And statistics released by REBA tell us that even before the pandemic, 15% of people at work were experiencing mental health difficulties at any one time. And this is at an estimated cost of between 33 and 42 billion pounds sterling annually to UK employers. In 2019, the statistics tell us that work-related stress accounted for nearly 40% of all work-related ill health cases, and 45%, so nearly 50% of all working days are actually lost due to ill health. So the figures are significant enough to warrant organisations in today's space to actually do something to support not only the organisation but their employees. And we're now going to come
I think
to
what
our
also
first
has
oh, sorry, Lindsay.
So I was going to say I think the pandemic has also highlighted the need for firms to have an open and safe environment for employees to talk about mental health. I think the pandemic has affected everyone differently. Everyone's had their own experiences and own challenges. So it's really important that employers look at their health and wellbeing strategies and their mental health strategies, and making sure that they're adaptable and can be assessed over time. And it's not just a case of having one strategy that will fit all, because mental health is so varied and affects so many different people.
Thank you, Lindsay. There's a slight delay on the line here, so thank you, Lindsay. And we come to our first poll.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah Jane. So I'm just going to launch the poll for everyone now. So as you can see, the question on screen is, how many mental health initiatives do you have running within your organisation? 5 different options for you to choose from there, ranging from 0 to more than 4. So I'm just going to give you guys a bit of time to cast your votes. But in the interim, I would just be keen to find out, both from Sarah Jane and Lindsay, do you think it's going to be at the lower end of the scale, at the higher end, or a mixed bag of responses?
I'm expecting there to be a bit of a mixed bag response, to be honest. I think it does vary depending on the sizes of organisations, you know, and the resource behind being able to implement initiatives as well. So I think that will have an impact on how many initiatives organisations are able to put in place.
Yeah, along with Lindsay, I think we might be expecting a cross-section here and a little bit of a mixed bag. So it'd be interesting to see what the results show us.
Okay, well, I'm just going to share the results of that now. And I think I have to say, I think both of you were right. We have got a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of responses here. So two mental health initiatives came out on top with 36%, closely followed by 4+ with 25%, and 4% went for the option of 0. So I guess, is there anything else you wanted to add in terms of what you're expecting and what the results have actually shown us?
Lindsay, what's your thoughts here?
I think one of the things I was going to say, one of the things I was going to say was that it's not necessarily the number of initiatives that organisations have, it's making sure that the ones that are in place are appropriate for the firm and the culture of the firm, and also making sure that they are quality initiatives and you are able to get the right data and metrics and successes out of the initiatives you do have.
Yes, I definitely think that's a fair point to consider. So I'm just going to hide the poll now and hand back over to you.
Ooh. Sorry, I just lost my screen there, Sophie, so apologies.
That's okay.
The poll technically pulled me out, so hopefully everybody can see my screen again.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, great. Okay, so with that in mind, and having a mixed bag of some of you not having any initiatives currently, and some of you having, quite a few running, let's delve into how we actually implement a mental health strategy. And for those of you that have got a significant number running, how we can look at improving on what you're already doing. So we've summarised some key points here in terms of things to consider. And the first one is communication, which everybody says, of course, is always key, and it really is. And having communication around your mental health strategy, particularly with senior buy-in, is imperative, because having that senior buy-in will allow you as an organisation to really show the firm's commitment to everybody across the board that you're taking their well-being seriously, and having it organisation wide rather than purely an HR policy, or it being considered purely an HR policy, is really important. And when you're launching your mental health strategy, it's really a good idea to actually make a real song and dance about it. I think there are lots of organisations out there who have fantastic strategies and initiatives, but because they're not launched in any significant manner, it can get lost, and therefore some individuals who may be suffering from mental health only really know it's there when they need to use it, rather than it openly being available. So we recommend a really great launch, weekly or monthly news where mental health is mentioned through those regular types of updates can be really helpful. Making it a good news story, and as I say, really accessible so that it's not hidden away on your intranet and really difficult for your employees to find. So training. Training is not just about, for example, having training for resilience for employees and line managers who may be suffering from mental health, but it is also about training the wider population, like line managers, to have the tools, to have the conversations with their employees around mental health challenges. And we'll touch on more around actually what Pinsent Masons are doing in all of these spaces. Having benefit providers is really important. So I think Lindsay referenced earlier that your mental health strategy is all around the quality of your mental health strategy, and that's also the case for benefit providers, making sure that you have support there for your employees. Personal stories. This really brings mental health to life right across your organisation, as we have found, and research tells us that it's not necessarily the people that you think will be affected by mental health that actually are affected. So having real personal stories brings things to life, creates that open and safe environment for people to talk about the challenges that they're suffering, regardless of their job title or their seniority. And then again, Lindsay has referred to this, and we'll come on to this in a little bit more detail, but having measurements of success in place for any initiative or even benefit provider that you have in place is absolutely critical. So being able to extract and solicit meaningful data and management information and assessing how successful your initiatives are really key, and having the parameters of success in place when you're thinking about the initiatives that you're running, so that everything is underpinned by the data, and we can use that data to amend and flex what we're doing and build upon the mental health strategies that you have running, or for those of you in the audience who are yet to perhaps implement a mental health strategy, extracting data to help you understand where you might put your initial focus. And with that, I'm going to link into and ask Lindsay to talk to us more about actually what Pinsent Masons do in this space.
Thanks, Sarah Jane. Yes, so at Pinsent Masons, we have a networking group called Mental Health Champions. These are our mental health first aiders, but we felt that the term first aid wasn't really necessarily appropriate for mental health, because we felt that it kind of gave the impression that it was something you could stick a plaster on or a bandage, rather than it being a commitment to supporting that individual on a more longer term basis. And we've used the word champions because we think it's a positive thing to talk about mental health and try and reduce the stigma around that. So our mental health champions are a global network of employees across various sections of our business who have volunteered to undergo through mental health training to help support people with those conversations. We've made it very clear to employees that we're not expecting people to go out and diagnose people with mental health conditions. It's clearly there to help support them in having those discussions and knowing where to go for further support and help and guidance. In addition to that, we also do some coaching for our mental health champions. So we have quarterly meetings with the mental health champions to go through some of the cases that they've faced with, obviously anonymised, so no details are revealed about the actual person, but talking about previous experiences that they've had, and to have like peer-to-peer conversations to constantly coach and support those employees. We also have an EAP dedicated line for mental health champions and line managers if they are finding it difficult to potentially talk to someone who is having a mental health situation, that they're also supported as well, because sometimes it can be quite difficult for people to hear a situation that someone's going through, so they might also need support as well. So that's something that we do with our mental health champions. We also we advertise our mental health champion network quite visibly, as well as having them detailed on the internet. So we, well, when we were in the office, we all had green lanyards, which signals to people visually as to who a mental health champion was, so they knew in the office who they could go and speak to and ask for support. Particularly if they didn't feel comfortable necessarily speaking to their line manager or HR, there was a visible network there for them to go and speak to and get the support that they needed. Another thing we do at Pinsent Masons is signposting. So we've put together a signposting document which details all of the various benefits and initiatives and resources that we promote across the firm linked to mental health. We felt we're putting a signposting document together, it helped people to access the data quickly and to know where they need to go to get additional support. The last thing we wanted was if someone felt that they needed to get some support, that they were finding it difficult to know where to start or where to go. So we've pulled together a signposting document which details that for the employees. And we also provide that to the line managers and mental health champions to support them in their discussions when they are speaking to someone who potentially is suffering from a mental health situation. We also have our Minds Matter portal, which sits within the health and wellbeing portal that we have as a firm. The Minds Matter portal details different webinars, resources, documents, signposting, and it just pulls together all the different various topics around mental health. So it holds everything that employees might need to support them. Again, to try and prevent people from having to go through various links to access things, it's all there on one portal for them. The health and wellbeing benefits, so we have quite a few traditional benefits at Pinsent Masons, like your typical private medical insurance, income protection policies, and life assurance policies as well. But what we try and do is we try and utilise our existing benefit providers to obtain additional resources, so webinars or key documents or advertising potential research that's come out. So we try and use our existing providers. I know there's a great deal of different health and wellbeing providers out there that might want to approach people to set up an external arrangement. So we try and utilise our existing provider network, which obviously comes at a lower cost to do that as well. So we do try and get some value added out of our health and wellbeing benefits. We also have networking events. So one of the things that I'm involved with is our health consolidated meetings. We found these really useful to help form and implement strategy for health and wellbeing and mental health. What we do with those health consolidated meetings is we get all of our benefit providers on a round table event, and we discuss all of the different MI data from each of those providers, and we try and spot trends that have happened. For example, in our private medical insurance, does that trend replicate what happens with our occupational health provision as well? And it's just to try and look at getting a trend of data to know where we need to focus our initiatives or focus our resource on, and those have been really helpful. And it also gives us insight into innovation across our different providers as well. We also have our wellbeing conversations, which we rolled out as a result of the pandemic. I think with everyone working from home, it's quite easy for people not to necessarily check in with each other and see how people are feeling from a wellbeing perspective. It does tend to be sometimes just talking about work issues, and because we're not in the office and having that physical one-to-one, it's really important that people do have those check-in conversations. So we have wellbeing conversations which are rolled out across the firm which is where the line manager will have a meeting and a catch up with each of their employees. And it's not to talk about work, but it's to talk about their well-being and how they are finding things at the moment. And we felt that that's been really powerful, and that it's broken down the barrier between employees and line managers. And line managers have commented about how they found that having those conversations, they've really got to know the employees better. I think sometimes when it's just been discussed about work, it's really difficult to get an insight as to how people are actually feeling, because some people just power through even if they are actually struggling. So just having that conversation and making it the norm to have conversations around well-being has had a real impact. One
And
of the things
sometimes,
our
Lindsay, it's the
responsible
case
business team,
that, sorry, Lindsay, I was just going to
yes,
say
yes,
sometimes it's the case
definitely.
that people feel more comfortable talking to their line manager than perhaps approaching HR, where it might feel a little bit more overwhelming or considered more serious. Have you found that in Pinsent Masons?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think sometimes, and I think this is probably the same for several organisations. I think if someone was told you need to go and speak to HR about this, that could potentially be a barrier to them getting help and support. So having that one-to-one
Yeah,
contact with your line manager, who they speak to on a regular basis, is really key to get that conversation going, and to make it more open and a safe environment for people to talk about these things. Just making it the norm that we talk about mental health on a regular basis, rather than it being a discussion because someone's had a crisis. So it's making it more a regular check-in conversation, really.
yeah.
So one of the other things that the responsible business team have rolled out is our mindful business charter. This was an initiative put together in partnership with Addershall Goddard and Barclays and Pinsent Masons. And it was a pledge really for employers that they would look at common sense principles really to look at mental health and making an open and trusting culture. So they would look at reclaiming like lunch breaks, making sure that people took regular breaks when required. So one of the things we've done in the firm is we've reduced our meetings. Instead of it being blocked out for an hour, you now book for 50 minutes or 45 minutes. And we felt that that space, by shortening the meetings, has given people the opportunity to have a break from the computer, to recap and just to recoup from meetings, rather than it being regular back-to-back meetings with people not having a break. I think there's a real concern due to the pandemic that people are potentially going to be burnt out because they've been in a lot more virtual meetings, and I think because they're virtual, people don't seem to have an issue with putting back-to-back meetings in place. So we've tried to put an initiative together to prevent that, and making sure people are having time away from their computer and having regular lunch breaks and regular breaks to make sure that they can recoup and come back to the next project or the next piece of work they need to work on. Senior buy-in as well has been really key for our mental health strategy. We actually have our managing partner as a sponsor for the mental health strategy, and we launched it as a firm-wide initiative. Our mental health Minds Matter portal sits on our firm-wide pages rather than sitting within our HR intranet pages. And we felt that that's showed a real commitment, that this is a firm's commitment to mental health. It's not a HR policy, it's not a HR strategy. It's a commitment from the firm that we will talk about mental health, and it will be a normal and conversation for us to talk about that, and it's an open and safe environment for people to have those conversations and to get support and request support when they need it as well. And we also look at the MI analysis and benchmarking. So we use get a lot of the MI from our benefits providers, so our employee assistance program, our private medical insurance, and we identify trends and adapt our strategy and initiatives based on the data that we receive from those initiatives and benefit provisions. And we make sure that we're constantly evolving our strategy in line with the data. We also benchmark ourselves against the legal sector, which has been really helpful, I think, because of particular challenges within certain areas. It's really key that we make sure that we are benchmarking ourselves to competitors and to the area that we actually work within.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. And I think you also mentioned, I don't know whether we refer to it in great detail here, but where in terms of sort of signposting and mental health champions, individuals wear lanyards within the business.
Yes, so they have the green lanyards, which all employees will be able to see from people being in the office. So if they've gone through the mental health first aid course, they will receive a green lanyard, which they can see, or a green pin that they can wear, which is visible to employees so they know where to go for support. We also have on our people search function, we have a green ribbon shown against anyone who's a mental health champion as well. Because we just want to make it available to people to see where they can go to for support if they don't feel comfortable, for example, speaking to their line manager or speaking to HR. They've got another pool of people that they can speak to and approach to get that support.
Yeah, I think it's lovely signposting internally for everything being connected and employees having different options in terms of where they can get support and who they can go to. And I love that visibility that you guys do at Pinsent Masons on this. Okay, thank you, Lindsay. And I think it sort of leads us nicely into the last point that Lindsay was looking at there was MI analysis and benchmarking. And we're going to sort of come and look at this in a little bit more detail now, which leads us nicely into our next poll. And Sophie, I'm hoping it's not going to chuck my screen out again, but let's hope it doesn't, guys. But if it does, I'll quickly get it back up for us.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah Jane. Hopefully that won't happen again, as you say. I'm just going to launch this poll now for you guys. So hopefully that is appearing on screen and distributing. Just to read out the headline of it for you, how easy do you find it to measure the effectiveness of your mental health initiatives? So as you can see, there are 4 different options there. So we've got easy, we have tools to support us, it's difficult, information is hard to get, we don't measure it, and other. So just as last time, I'm going to put you guys on the spot slightly ahead of the results coming in. Sarah Jane, perhaps if I start with you, is there anything that you kind of anticipate that might garner the most amount of responses or votes in this?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. We work with a lot of organisations globally, and actually being able to not only extract good quality data, but have it meaningful as well is probably one of the most difficult challenges that businesses face right across the board. And so it wouldn't surprise me, although our audience could prove me wrong, that being able to get data to actually look at that underpins your initiatives might be slightly more challenging than we think, but hence why I'm really interested in what our audience have to say about this, because data is so important. Also, particularly if we're looking at getting senior buy-in, they are interested in the data and they will be led by the data by the HR function. So, Lindsay, any thoughts from you on this one?
Yeah, I was going to echo really what you were saying, Sarah Jane. I think it is really difficult to measure the effectiveness sometimes, particularly if you have several different initiatives, or even if you don't have any initiatives at all. It's quite difficult to consolidate the data and to find meaningful trends, which is why we put a lot of things together in place by having like a steering group and having the consolidated health meetings, try and pull things together, so you're not getting data from, say, exit interviews versus your employee assistance program, but they don't really filter through anywhere, or they're kept quite separate. So it's really good to try and consolidate where you possibly can, and I find that helps by having like roundtable events or steering groups to pull all of the different resources and all the different data that you have to try and consolidate that and to measure the effectiveness.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm just going to share the results now. So as you guys will be able to see on screen, the most popular answer for votes was 48% who said it's difficult, information is hard to get. 40% said we don't measure it, and 7% said it's easy and we have tools to support this. So just before I kind of close the poll, do you guys have any additional thoughts, comments, or insights based on the feedback that we've got from the poll just now?
Lindsay, any thoughts on that? Otherwise, I'll jump in.
I was just going to say, I think it probably comes on to our next slide. I guess sometimes it's not necessarily looking at one particular area of measurement, so it's looking at the broader spectrum. So I think sometimes the information is there, but it's sometimes difficult to know where to start. So I think it's whenever you implement a mental health strategy, I think it's important that you kind of define how you're going to measure it from the outset, so you can actually look at the effectiveness of it in the future. And I think that kind of filters on to the next slide, which we're going to discuss about how at Pinsent Masons, how we've kind of looked at pulling those success factors in and how we are actually measuring our effectiveness.
Okay, I'm just gonna
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Sorry, I
Sorry,
was just
Sophie.
going to say I'm just going to hide the poll now, and obviously you can give us your insights, and then I guess I can hand back over to you for the next slide.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. I mean, I'll just echo, just whilst you're doing that, I'll just echo what Lindsay said. I think that it can be difficult. I think HR as a function tends to sometimes be challenged by being able to measure things tangibly. So even if I think about coaching or perhaps previously learning and development, it can be difficult to solicit data that allows you to underpin further initiatives and, for example, get that senior buy-in. I think technology is helping us change that, and we'll look at how your technical tools internally that you may have access to can support you with this. But I think that data extraction is key to any initiative that you're running, and to look at how successful it is, which, as Lindsay says, actually sort of nicely brings us into our next slide here, which is all around that measurement of success. And if I let you lead on this, Lindsay, and I'll sort of chip in on some of the items.
That's great, thanks. Yeah, so one of the measures of success is evaluating absence figures. So at Pinsent Masons, we have a HR system where absence is recorded for employees. And what we've done is we've looked at the absence figures over a period of time to see if there's a trend with particular absence going up higher at certain points during the year, for example, and we're constantly reviewing those absence figures. I think one of the things that organisations are concerned about at the moment is with the pandemic is burnout, and that people have potentially been working for such a long period without taking the time out that they need, either for holiday or even if someone's been feeling unwell. People have tended to power through almost, when really they should be taking the time out to look after themselves and their well-being. So that's something that we've been measuring in terms of the absence figures, to see how successful our health and well-being strategy and our mental health strategy has been. The next area we look at is around engagement surveys. So we have regular pulse surveys which assess how people feel about our health and well-being initiatives and mental health strategy at Pinsent Masons. So we get regular feedback back on that. And we also look at the quarterly check-ins on well-being and as to how people have responded to those, and in terms of how they're feeling with their well-being at that point in time. And if there are any spikes, then potentially we would look at whether the initiatives we've got in place or the benefit provisions we've got in place, whether there's something we should be doing more to support people at that time as well. Analysis of management information, as discussed previously, is really important. That we look at the deep dive into the data to see where there are potential areas of concern or trends. For example, we look at our private medical insurance on a quarterly basis, And the things we look at is the number of claims that people have put through for certain conditions. We tend to focus on the three main conditions as mental health, cancer and musculoskeletal, which is typical, I think, across the market really. But we also deep dive into that detail to look at not always just the number of claims that have been made, but the actual physical cost of those claims. Sometimes you can expect claims to go up, but if the cost has gone down, then we would view that as more people are getting early intervention help, which is a good thing. Whereas if the cost of the claims is going up, potentially that means that people are having more expensive treatment, like in-house psychiatric care. So we look at the deep dive into that data to spot trends and see how things are progressing throughout the year on an ongoing basis. Utilisation of support, so we look at our employee assistance programme and the take up of that over certain months. We did see an increase as a result of the lockdown rules changing over the last 12 months. So it tended to be whenever there was a government announcement, potentially there could be more calls or less calls into EAP. And we do look at that level of detail. And we also look at the reasons for people are calling. The data is all anonymised, so it's never identifiable to anyone. But it does allow us to pick up on certain themes that people are ringing the EAP service about. Attraction and retention is also a good way of measuring success of any mental health strategy. So we gather feedback on why prospective employees might choose Pinsent Masons. For example, is it our commitment to health and wellbeing and mental health, which is a good way of measuring, our success of actually having those strategies in place. We also look at the exit interviews and feedback from those in terms of well-being and whether people felt supported and whether that had any impact on their decision to leave. And obviously anything like that would get fed back to HR to be investigated and picked up. And then the empowerment of line managers has been a good measure of success. I think the wellbeing conversations has led to more line managers having more regular check-ins with their employees around mental health and well-being, and it's made it the norm really for those conversations to happen and made it more an open environment for people to talk about their mental health. And the frequency of those meetings as well has meant that it's more of a regular check-in rather than it being just picked up at like appraisal time. People are having regular check-ins with their line management. And coaching and training data. So we look at the number of people that have taken up learning and development training courses, which we offer internally, and also the feedback forms, how people found those useful, or whether there's anything that they would like us to offer more or less on in regards to certain themes or case studies and things like that as well. So we also have the peer sessions for mental health champions, which is like networking. And we coach the champions on how to approach certain situations. So it's an ongoing learning process really for the mental health champions. They're supported as well with having those conversations.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. And I'm going to sort of look at how technology is helping the HR function actually solicit meaningful data, and how you can have it more at your fingertips on a 24/7, 365 basis to get that data to support either designing and launching your first mental health and wellbeing initiative, and also enhancing the initiatives that you're currently running. So Bridge works with Pinsent Masons, and we work with organisations globally across the board. Equally, we work with smaller organisations that have 50 to perhaps 100 employees only within their remit. But your learning management system, your performance management system, should be able to support you and your employees with that whole connection piece. So having regular one-to-ones with line managers, being able to create group meetings, online clinics, support through easy, simple technology that allows people to feel connected and have those conversations. So whether that's with a line manager or, as in St Mason's case, a mental health champion, being able to have a safe space where those topics, those conversations can take place. And whilst the detail of those conversations are not sent back to HR, but perhaps the cadence and frequency, so that we can look at how are people connecting, is that making a difference to the claims, the cost of the claims we're having, absence and illness and sickness within the organisation. Also, I think both Lindsay and I have referenced training being a consideration for your mental health and wellbeing strategy. So again, as organisations, having the technology to support online flexible learning, easy access to quality content, live trainings, coaching and mentoring sessions, being able to provide your employees with access of support that's easy, that's friendly, that's quick to use. And having that flexibility, as I say. So at the moment, the majority of us in some professions are still working from home, are home-based, where we are stuck at our desktops, but giving an organisation and its employees great flexibility to be able to access different kinds of support. So whether that be learning, training, one-to-one meetings with their line manager or mental health champions or HR across the board, just gives that flexibility and makes it easy for people to access the great support that you're actually providing as organisations, whether you're large or small. We've referenced engagement surveys are one measurement of success. So again, having your learning management or performance management system being able to provide you with meaningful data on that, so that we can look at the data and again help us understand how our initiatives are working for us. So that whole data analytics and management information really does underpin everything that we may be doing in terms of our mental health and wellbeing strategy. So measuring the cadence and frequency of one-to-ones, conversations, learning, training, coaching. Is it working for people? Do we need to amend that content? Do we need to think about how we share that content in a different way? So hopefully technology and having that at your fingertips with the easy click of a button should provide you with data that you can actually look at and also share with the senior executive team. You know, we've talked about how important it is for that senior management buy-in, and if they can see the data and the difference that that's making, it stands you in greater stead to be able to actually implement the strategies that you want to with your employees. So just in summary here, with some tips in terms of all the things that we've talked about, some of the key areas for you to have a look at and consider when you are either developing your first mental health wellbeing strategy, or whether you're looking to provide different and new initiatives within your organisation, is communication is key, particularly with that senior buy-in. It shows commitment organisation-wide rather than it just purely being an HR policy, and having that holistically linked and intertwined with all other initiatives that you're running is actually really key, as it makes it an open and safe environment where people feel comfortable to actually ask for support and help. We also focused on training. So again, not just resilience training for individuals that might be suffering, but also supporting your line managers internally to have those conversations with people who might be suffering from mental health. And training can be everything from your EAP provider right the way through to much lower cost initiatives that you can think about, which is how do you use your line managers to support any initiative that you're running to help your employees. Having the right benefit providers in place is really key. Lindsay touched on this earlier, which is it's not about how many initiatives necessarily you're running, but the quality of those initiatives. And the same applies to your benefit providers. Some of you may have an EAP program currently running, and others may not. And I think it depends on your use case and what's important for you as an organisation. We talked about personal stories, so really bringing it to life right across your employee base, whether you've got 50 employees or thousands of employees. I think those personal stories really bring it to life and make it not a hidden topic that has a stigma attached to it, but making it a topic that everybody is aware of. It's open, approachable, and people feel comfortable to ask for support and help. And then lastly, one of our biggest tips is that measurement of success. And as Lindsay referenced earlier for us, I think having the parameters of success in place before you launch the initiative is really key and will really help you understand what kind of data you need to have at your fingertips to actually be able to measure success. And having that data and assessing all those initiatives will really support you. So as we say here in Bridge, and when we work with our clients, really people do matter most in your organisation. And both Lindsay and I would like to thank you very, very much for your time and would now love to open the floor for any questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you both Sarah Jane and Lindsay. We've had a couple of questions come in already, so I'll try and get through as many as we can within this short Q&A session. So the first one is, we don't have a mental health initiative. Where do we start? Perhaps Lindsay, if I come to you first on that.
So I think the first thing to look at is, if you don't have anything in place at the moment, is looking at what you want to try and achieve. Is there a particular area that you want to look at? Is it things like absence stats that you want to improve? And I think, like we said previously, it's having that mechanism as a measurement of success before you actually go ahead and develop a strategy to know exactly how you're going to assess whether it's working or not. So it's looking at what you want to achieve from implementing that as a starting point, and then I would say it's looking at getting like the senior manager buy-in. I think what's key for senior management buy-in is to say what the value added is and the return on investment. So it would be, for example, with the absence figures, it would be how much the absence stats are at the moment in terms of lost revenue for days absence, and how you would measure that to say it's been a success because we've had this many people where the absence figures have reduced, and this is the return on investment we've had as a result. So it's getting that senior manager buy-in as well.
Sarah Jane, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I would just focus, if you haven't got a strategy, and of course it will depend on your budget, I would I support what Lindsay says there, and I think I would think about the easiest initiative and the one that perhaps might generate the biggest impact. So I know we talked across the board at having everything from different benefit providers like an EAP program to have as a support initiative, but also looking at internally with line managers what you can do there. And there could be some really quick wins that are low cost for you, but that might create a really, really big impact. And so I would consider possibly starting there.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. I think this leads us on nicely to the next question, actually, and something that both of you have kind of touched on throughout the duration of the webinar. But what would you say, if I could maybe get a tip from both of you, that is the best way to get senior buy-in? Sarah Jane, if I can start with you this time, and then I'll come to you, Lindsay, as well.
Gosh, I'm sure Lindsay will say very much the same thing that I'm probably about to say, which is senior execs love data, and they will be focused on what the data is telling us. And I think to get that senior buy-in, if you can do some initial analysis of anything that might be that you might have running, or if you don't have anything running, looking at things like absence, sickness, claims, to give you a baseline to actually build upon, because the impact of not having a mental health and wellbeing strategy could be very, very costly for your organisation, whether you are a global FTSE, you know, top 500, or whether you are a small, agile, independent startup with only 100 employees. I think the impact and the cost on the baseline of the business will be what those senior executives are looking at. And if you can show and demonstrate that doing something to lower that cost, you will absolutely not only get their attention, but hopefully their buy-in.
That's great. Lindsay, anything to add?
Um, Yeah, I think Sarah Jane's could probably cover the majority really as to what I would say. I think the only other thing I would take into consideration is when getting senior manager buy-in is to make it any strategy like applicable to your firm's values as well. So linking in with the organisation's culture and the firm to make it a firm commitment, so it doesn't just sit outside of the firm or sit as a HR strategy or a HR policy. So to get senior manager buy-in, I would say, we want to offer this because it aligns to our overall, values and culture as well.
Okay, perfect. And I think this is probably the last question that we've got time for. But on the summary and tips slide, one of the points on there was around kind of personal stories. So one question that we've had come in is, do either of you have any tips for getting personal stories? Particularly if people do feel a little anxious or nervous about sharing their story. Lindsay, perhaps if I start with you and then back to Sarah Jane.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think it's sometimes it is difficult for people to share their story, but I think it's to empower people really to feel that they've got an open and safe environment to share. So I think sometimes it only takes that one person to say, actually, I've been affected and I'm comfortable to share my story with you. And then it will have like a trickle-down effect that more people will talk about it. I mean, we've done a few sessions, like webinars where we've had like guest speakers as well, and just made it like a safe environment for people to feel that they can share. And I think the more people that share, it does have a really big impact, particularly if it's people that you wouldn't have expected potentially to have had a mental health issue. I think it's really empowering to have that safe environment for them to be able to be open and tell people their story.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. And just to sort of build upon what Lindsay said there, I think, as Pinsent Masons they have a network of mental health champions, and perhaps there are people in the business who others look up to, who are perhaps mentors within your organisation currently, where you might want to consider approaching them first to see if they would be happy to share their story. But also those of us who are designing the initiative and launching the initiative. So, we've talked about senior buy-in. Perhaps one of our senior executives would be happy to share their story, or somebody within the HR function who is launching this to just open it out and just share that. And I think Lindsay and I have touched on this, it's very personal, somebody's mental health journey, and it doesn't matter what your job title is or how senior or not you are, it affects everybody in an organisation in different ways. So I think perhaps asking champions, a senior sponsor, senior exec, even somebody within the HR team to actually share their personal story as well, I think will really make a difference actually, and allow others to see, yeah, it's just normal. Everybody suffers from it. and create that environment of openness and safety where people feel comfortable to talk about it and where it just becomes the norm for you in your organisation, which is where we're sort of striving for. Hope that's helpful.
Well, thank you both for thank you for sharing those tips. I hope everyone found some of the talking points in that Q&A useful. But unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. So I just wanted to thank you all for listening in. And of course, a special thank you to Sarah Jane at Bridge and Lindsay at Pince and Masons for joining us today and sharing their insights with us. If you do have any questions, please do endeavour to get in touch with Bridge. And I just want to wish you all a fantastic rest of the day, and we do look forward to welcoming you back to additional webinars in future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.